like a good starter for me to begin the talk. My name is Liz Todd. I'm Professor of Educational Inclusion. I'm Director of the Institute of Social Science. And this is Talk Social Science. This is a forum for the Institute of Social Science at Newcastle University for chatting, hearing about, discussing very interesting ideas, controversial issues, research in social science. And this is our first since lockdown. And usually we have a very informal meeting, we get a chance to chat, to meet around, mingle, and have some lunch. We can't do that now. So we are also very interested in what topics you'd like, or whether you want us to extend this forum and have a bit of time for breakout, which we haven't had for networking, because that's what we would normally have this sort of thing. But you are very, very welcome to this. We are delighted today. We have a crucial topic and two excellent and very well-known speakers. The topic: how does or doesn't the government engage with science? And getting intelligent and values-based social science to inform practice and education is my own passion. That's not what we're talking today, but just to show you where we're coming from, and is what my research and community work is based on. And I see similar convictions in the wonderful social science throughout Newcastle University in all kinds of areas. But it's never been so important as now, has it, to do this? In fact, it's always been important. And if I look back on my own career, one of my previous professional lives, a long time ago, because I'm much more of a sociologist these days, but previous professional lives as an educational psychologist, the founder of that profession faked science, made up data on twins to make false claims about IQ and inheritance. And we're still dealing with the political implications of IQ, race, class in education. It's still being felt and having ramifications throughout society. But as I said, it's never been so important as now. The need for, in the current pandemic, for the government to have good use of science and social science. So once again, the politics of the use of science is something we need to open up, to make transparent, to find the issues in, to discuss, and to address in how we move forward. And that's something I hope will happen in the seminar today. So what we're going to do is we have two speakers. That's a normal thing, 2 or 3 speakers in our Talk Social Science. I'm going to introduce each of them, and I'll introduce the first one in a minute. Both speakers will speak for 15 minutes. First of all, Roger Burrows and then Allyson Pollock. I'll warn each of them when they've got 2 minutes to go. After the talks, I will put your questions to the speakers. So please, can you put any questions or ideas or things you want to be addressed or comments you've got in the chat? So we're gonna do that. It might be, there's possibility that we'll find that we can actually have a discussion and actually have people offering their own questions, but we're going to start off with me putting the questions to the speakers. Please keep your mic muted at all times, and please keep your video off during both talks. After the talks, when we get to this discussion, it would be great to have your videos on if you would wish that, so we can see each other and get a bit of a sense of community as much as you can get in this strange situation. I think that is all. We are recording everything, so this is all going to be recorded and put on our institute website later, as long as the speakers are still happy for that to happen. I think that is the end of what I want to say. So I just want now to introduce our first speaker. So we're delighted to have Roger Burrows. Thank you very much indeed, Roger, for giving time. I know it's really great that we can be here. Roger is Professor of Cities. He is somebody who I've known since he got to Newcastle University. Delighted to have got to know him and his work. And he's somebody who thoroughly crosses fields: social policy, sociology, statistics, political economy, cultural studies. I could just go on and on. Housing, urban studies. He came to Newcastle from Goldsmith, and before that from a number of other organisations, institutions, universities. He is a prolific publisher, and is highly interesting and authoritative on a range of different topics, but is authoritative, I mean, really gets into the detail of things and is very scrupulous in how he does that. So we're delighted that he can talk. So Roger, over to you. Thank you very much indeed for 15 minutes, and we'll look forward to discussing what you've got to say later.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So 15 minutes trying to surface what the COVID-19 crisis has revealed about some rather peculiar and underlying attitudes towards different versions of science within the policy making process. I think I should begin by going back to Michael Gove's infamous claim during the run-up to Brexit in 2016 that people in this country have had enough of experts as part of this kind of populist claim against expertise. And to think about how that has changed radically in response to the COVID-19 crisis, where scientific expertise is now called upon as a rhetorical device to justify all manner of different things. I want to look at the way in which COVID-19 has surfaced the activities of a range of characters who represent a range of different versions of science, different versions of technology, and different versions of cultural politics. The people I want to focus on, my cast of characters, if you like, primarily Dominic Cummings, who will be known to all of you as the Prime Minister's chief political advisor. Someone called David Halpin, who will be less well known, I suspect. Originally a social scientist, he currently runs what is formally known as not formally known, is known as the Nudge Unit, formerly known as the Behavioural Insights Team with inside government. He's been doing that since 2010. It was a unit set up by David Cameron. But I also want to touch upon another character, a young man called Ben Warner. Now, this isn't just a matter of kind of cheap journalism to talk about these people. I think these people are emblematic and represent a range of kind of tensions within a scientific debate within the highest echelons of British public policy. The Nudge Unit has suddenly come to prominence because of its key role in the Johnson government's COVID-19 task force, and because Cummings is also a major advocate for behavioural psychology and behavioural economics in public policy. Halpin is one of the few non-professional scientists on the government's key scientific advisory body, SAGE, along with Cummings and their special advisor, Ben Warner. So they're important figures within the non-traditional physical and biological sciences group on SAGE. Perhaps Allyson could say something about that later on. The Behavioural Insights team has been incredibly important in terms of trying to introduce the insights of behavioural economics, the idea that people can gently be moved towards certain behaviours which have quite dramatic responses. But let me say something about Ben Warner. It seems to be Cummings' decision to appoint this young data scientist who took a PhD, not in the social sciences, but in quantum physics, and was until recently a postdoctoral fellow in the Centre for Nanotechnology at UCL, where he also got his doctorate. But he's better known because he played a key role as a data specialist in the successful 2006 Vote Leave campaign, and as a developer of the computer model that successfully predicted the Conservatives' large majority in the 2019 general election. He subsequently accepted an invitation to be Johnson's advisor in the policy, number 10 policy team, working with Cummings in order to, quote, provide digital solutions to make government work better. Now, I don't want to do a biography of this young man, but it's important to note the following, that his brother is Mark, and he's the chief executive officer of a company called Faculty, which is an artificial intelligence consultancy whose clients include the BBC, Cisco, British Airways, Dow Jones, Deloitte, Experian, and the UK government. Previously, Faculty was called ASI Data Science, and it worked with the UK Home Office on its counter-terrorism strategy by deploying AI to block video uploads from Daesh, achieving, it claimed, a 94% success rate. Among Faculty's, this company's other key UK government clients are the NHS, which along with Peter Thiel, someone I'll return to, a key founder and funder of neo-reactionary ideas, along with his company, Palantir, they were awarded the contract to handle confidential patient data in order to build, quotes, predictive computer models around the response to COVID-19. The Guardian has claimed to have seen an internal NHS document that showed that Faculty was planning to run a computer simulation based on, this is the key thing I want to say, targeted herd immunity, which the company lawyers have subsequently denied ever took place. But following the publication of the Guardian's report of this hitherto confidential membership of SAGE, David Halpin, the head of the Nudge Unit, has been very careful to insist that he and his associates in the Nudge Unit only provide analysis. They do not advise government on what the best course of action is to take. But this, I want to suggest, appears to be in marked contrast to an interview that Halpin gave to the BBC at the beginning of March, 11th of March 2020, in which the government's chief behavioural scientist, Halpin, talked openly about cocooning groups of elderly in care homes until such a time as, quote, herd immunity is achieved, despite the fact that there is no scientific evidence that this novel pathogen provides immunity to reinfection or viral shedding once a person has contracted it. In his interview, Halpin, in a phrase which was not preambled by any statement that he wasn't speaking on behalf of the government, said this: "There's going to be a point, assuming the epidemic flows and grows as it will do, where you want to cocoon to protect these at-risk groups so that they don't catch the disease. By the time they come out of their cocooning, herd immunity has been achieved in the rest of the population." This position, that it would be possible to shield vulnerable old people so that they would not be susceptible to the virus, is also consistent with a policy document revealed by Keir Starmer in PMQs as late as the 13th of May. This is what Keir said. In his speech on Sunday, the Prime Minister said that we need to rapidly reverse this awful epidemic in our care homes. But earlier this year, and until the 12th of March, the government's own official advice was, and I'm quoting from it, he says, "It remains very unlikely that people receiving care in a care home will become infected. Yesterday's ONS figures showed that at least 40% of all deaths from COVID-19 were in care homes. Does the Prime Minister accept the government were too slow to protect people in care homes?" Now, this is detail, very important detail, but it underpins something I want to move on to in a moment. So let me just continue with some of the detail. The timing of Halpin's BBC interview, I think, is very significant because the day after, it was when the government's chief scientific officer, Patrick Vallance, made the following statement: "Our aim is to try and reduce the peak, broaden the peak, not suppress it completely. Also, because the vast majority of people just get a mild illness, to build up to some kind of herd immunity so more people are immune to this disease and it will reduce the transmissions at the same time as we protect those who are most vulnerable." That's very important, but there's a second aspect to Cummings' role and his attitude towards science within this context. And the second aspect has again been surfaced in violent terms, really, by the speech at the weekend by Gove, and of course the removal of the head of the civil service, Sedwill. If you haven't read Gove's speech, it's worth getting. It's published in Reaction, and it's essentially a Marxist Gramscian analysis of current government policy, for reasons I will return to towards the end. The second aspect of the SAGE controversy, though, is connected to Cummings' notorious disregard for the Whitehall establishment and his suspicion that without firm handling, the civil service and their expert advisors are prone to going native. Circumnavigating the civil service by hiring special advisors is nothing new, and indeed Cummings began his own government career by being appointed as a SPAD to Gove. But what is new is the decision to outsource the appointments of SPADs to lobbying consultants, to Hanbury Strategy, whose CEO, Paul Stevenson, was not only Director of Communications for the Vote Leave campaign, but also the data provider for the Tories in the election model that was developed by Sam Warner, the data analyst from UCL. As a leading public affairs lawyer told PR Week, and I quote, "The appointment of Hanbury is part of a wider issue and marks a significant shift in the relationship between government and the private sector. According to Dr. Stuart Thompson, Head of Public Affairs at Pitman's, it comes at a time when the government seems intent on bringing its disputes with the civil service to a head." That's just happened in the last few days. "The attitude of being for us or against us does not fit the independent civil service model. So instead, Number 10 has decided to go outside to those it feels share a similar outlook." He says, "The Hanbury decision could be seen as the first step in taking outside advice and really challenging the power of the civil service. Expect to see similar moves rolled out across government departments. That rollout is beginning big time. Fundamental to the mindset of Cummings and his backers amongst wealthy Tory donors and the anti-European wing of the parliamentary Tory party was a belief in the need for radical systemic change, an ideological genealogy that, it turns out, has got more in common with the strategic long game of sections of the British Fourth International, and especially the remnants of the Revolutionary Communist Party around Spiked, many of whom now work inside the number 10 policy unit, primarily clustered around Munir Mirza, who has a PhD in sociology, supervised by the cult leader of living Marxism, Frank Furedi. It has more to do with those ideas than it does with any form of mainstream conservative ideology, leaving aside an historical disdain for the institutions of the European Union. The real inspiration for Vote Leave's unorthodox and ultimately successful tactics in winning a majority of support for Brexit against all odds was not, I would say, the slick PR lobbying firms that once employed the likes of Cameron, but Silicon Valley and this culture of libertarianism that Spiked and the remnants of the Revolutionary Communist Party around Furedi represent. STEM, science, technology, and maths and medicine problem solvers with advanced degrees in maths, computer science, electronic engineering, and physics, especially quantum physics, who not only provided the blueprints for disruptive technologies such as blockchain, P2P encryption, that provided the foundation from everything from Bitcoin to PayPal to WhatsApp and Reddit, but also used their spare time to blog about how machine learning offered the prospect for a world free of government of the sorts of regulatory controls on freedom of speech and issues such as tax abolition and drug and gun legislation that continues to obsess the American libertarian right in the context of ever-widening anti-liberal fronts on the so-called culture wars coming to a university near you very, very quickly. So I'm talking about the work of writers like Curtis Yarvin, like Nick Land, and other people who have been influenced by that neo-reactionary thought program.
So Roger, you've got 2 minutes left.
Friedman and so on. Thank you.
Roger, you've got 2 minutes left.
Thank you. I'll finish. This mishmash of mainstream and fringe social research fields constitutes, I want to argue, the desperata of the now notorious Misfits and Weirdos unofficial recruitment advert on Cummings' blog, which led to the hiring and fairly rapid firing of the 27-year-old super forecaster Andrew Zabriskie, who supported Nick Land and the Dark Enlightenment. His views on the claimed relationship between intelligence and race was described by the business minister Kwasi Kwarteng as racist, offensive, and objectionable. While the Downing Street source was not named, a number 10 spokesman refused 32 times to say whether Boris Johnson shared Zabriskie's view. The well-established support for and the promotion of eugenicist and race science within the neo-reactionary community, to which many of these characters Cummings explicitly align themselves, has become increasingly legitimated in the mainstream of public policy as the Overton window has moved ever rightwards. My final point, and I hope I can do this within the 2 minutes frame, is that Cummings in particular is a Gramscian. He knows his Gramsci. He knows about hegemonic discursive strategies, and he's more adept at deploying those strategies politically than are those on the progressive left. My final observation is from a speech he made in 2015, where he draws a clear elective affinity between discourses of immunology on the one hand and discourses on complexity theory and the necessity for the revision of the civil service by commercial gov-cores, by the production and the displacement of current institutions of civil society by commercial organizations. Final point, then I'll go. Despite an arts-based education, Cummings has a BA in history from Oxford University. He's part of an increasingly important and influential group of policy gurus who have been surfaced through the COVID-19 crisis, who have drawn to a very large extent on corporate management systems as a replacement for conventional government. He's also an enthusiast for big data-driven complexity theory, which starts from the assumption that human-based decisions are largely redundant, and that AI-governed methods for organizing the allocation of human needs are far more efficient and less liable to incompetence and corruption by the civil service. Scary stuff. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. Let's give you, everybody sitting at home, please, let's just give Roger a clap.
No need for that, thank you.
No, it's all bizarre to do this, but I think these rituals are very important. They're human, they're things we need to do, and we'll clap both of you at the end. But thank you, that's fantastic. I mean, your razor incision, forensic sort of social science, and is very important there. So thank you so much, Roger, and we'll get into some questions about it later.